I mean, honestly, if I'm completely transparent, it sucks. I hate this because what it means is that it puts an increased importance on rented land.
Hello and welcome to episode 229 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday the 10th of August. I hope you've had a great week and you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rock star, but I am a CMO and trusted advisor. And you can come say hello. You can find me and my guests and all the things we talk about on rockstarcmo.com and Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn. And we are proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This week in the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, we continue to dive into the stars conversation we started last week and look at how it fits with our 5 effing marketing fundamentals. And Robert Rose in our virtual bar with a cocktail and a thoughts about content beyond our website. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day, my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment. We are back in the Marketing Studio with Jeff Clark, our resident strategy advisor and former Forrester research director.
Hello, Ian. Welcome to the Rockstar CMO studio. How are things today?
I'm good, thank you, mate. We're using, just so to explain why I was giggling on the way in, is that we're using Riverside because we've swapped from Squadcast. Just a little plug for Riverside there. And it counts you in as you start your recording. And we were just marveling at the counting in and then realized we were talking.
We realized we had 0. Take off. Whoa, jeez.
Which I'm sure I could edit out, and then this bit of the podcast would make no sense. Which presumes, of course, that the
I'd say
podcast,
leave it in.
Yeah, but it also presumes that the podcast makes any sense any of the rest of the time. So there we go. All right. So thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the welcome. And let's start with the first item on the agenda, which is how is the weather in sunny old Massachusetts?
Well, it's the sun's trying to come out.
Mm-hmm.
As I had noted, we were discussing beforehand, is that Hurricane Debbie is working its way up the coast, and that usually pushes weather our way. Usually pushes warm, humid weather our way, but we've got kind of cool, humid weather and a little bit of rain. So, but you know, it's a break from the just blistering heat we had for a couple of weeks. So, cheers to that.
Yes, I've got a grey, sort of warmish, not really anything day, which is shocking for the British weather. And then yesterday I was in London and it was raining. It's like, it's the beginning of bloody August. So anyway, bit hit and miss here in the UK, but what would you expect?
You know, I don't know if I've ever said this on this program, but I at one time in my life, earlier part of my life, I did an 8-week bike ride from Inverness to London.
Wow.
Inverness, Scotland, that is.
Yes.
And you can imagine the variety of weather. You know, it's just like, it's like you get a great stretch in Scotland. You go, well, wow, what's all this about? And then you get, 3 weeks of rain and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. It's Scotland. So that is an awfully long bike ride. What is that?
There were some train hops in there, by the way.
Oh, okay. But
a lot of biking.
For listeners that aren't familiar with Scotland, it is such a beautiful place, but so bleak when the weather's horrible. But you catch a nice day and there's nowhere better.
There's no place better on a sunny, reasonably warm day, and there's no place worse after 3 weeks of rain.
Absolutely. It's like, actually, plenty of the United Kingdom is the same way. Wales is the same way.
Yeah.
The Pennines. Anyway, let's. We were just commenting before I hit record about how much we've got to cover today. So let's get cracking. Right. So in the last episode, and I think I promised I would never say this statement ever again. We reached for the stars, an acronym that we pulled from Michael D. Watkins' classic book, The First 90 Days. It's a method for understanding the kind of business you are as a leader to aid planning and strategy. The STARS acronym stands for Startup, Turnaround, Accelerate Growth, Realignment, and Sustaining Success. So we discussed all of that last week, and I think we quite enjoyed that model. And we discussed the challenges and opportunities a marketing leader might face in each of those different organizational profiles, or whatever you would describe that as. But this week, as we promised, we'll dig a little deeper into what this means for our planning, using, of course, our faithful 5 effing marketing fundamentals.
Ta-da!
And it's great because, as I commented last week, Michael Watkins came up with 5 effing things. We have our 5 effing things. Let's get them together.
Let's put them together and get 10 effing things.
But before we get on to the fundamentals, from our discussion last week and listening back, I don't know if you listened back, are there other factors you think we need to consider as part of this part of the discussion? What say you, Jeff?
Well, I think one of the things which, I thought we may have touched on really briefly, but was that the R of realignment is can come in such many different flavors, which have very different implications. I mean, when you think about startup versus accelerated growth versus sustained growth, I mean, it's like they have characteristics where every company's in common. But if you think about a realignment, I mean, that could be because you need to put out new market offerings and it's kind of a total reset, or you've merged with another company, so you're melding offerings and messaging into this combined value proposition, or you've acquired or you've been acquired, or, it's just, I guess another way you could look at the R is revitalization. You've got a marketable offering, but it needs to be rebranded, reset messaging. It's, it's still very relevant for the marketplace. So those are at least 4 tangents off of that one.
Yeah, no, and I was just thinking there, I don't know how easy this is to follow when you're listening, but STARS is Startup, Turnaround, Accelerate Growth, Realignment, and Sustaining Success. And what we're saying here is that realignment can mean so many different things. We could have almost done a whole podcast just on
realignment,
on different experiences we've had of realignment, right? So I think that's a really good point, and maybe something we'll come back to.
Put it on the list.
I will. I'll add it to the list. We do have a list, listeners, so I'll put that on there. Yeah, there is some planning that goes into this, really. And the other thing I was thinking about on this, that I was wondering whether you need to overlay on it, and I've actually kind of answered my own question here, but because I think the STARS model applies regardless of the size of your business. Because I was thinking, I wonder if this is just a big business thing or a little business thing. And actually, you could apply this to different departments, different product lines, and they could all be in different places. But it's something I think as part of your planning you need to think about, is that maybe a new product line is a little startup you've got to incubate, and maybe the rest of the business is in a bit of a, sustained growth phase or something like that.
Well, you think about a company like, say, Google, who at one point was a startup, and then they went into accelerated growth mode, and they've been in accelerated growth mode at very many different sizes of organization. And so, I think I think the stars apply no matter the size of the org.
Yeah, absolutely. And also you get sort of, you get, obviously a startup is going to be small. So some of them imply the size, but anyway, a startup could be a department within a bigger business. I've already said that. I'm repeating myself. We haven't got time for that, Jeff. We've got loads to get through. So, how do you think this fits into our 5 F in marketing fundamentals? What do you think? Do you think?
Well, I think it's definitely additive because, the stars, is initially really focused on the company's strategy. And so, in the first 90 days, it's not necessarily first 90 days for CMO, although every CMO I've known has read it. It could be for a CEO, head of sales or whatever. So, but the whole stars framework is about the company strategy. And so either the CMO has helped find that strategy, which is tough if you're new in your first 9 days, or you're taking your cues from the strategy. So I've joined a company who is in a realignment. Okay, what does that mean in terms of my planning, my my resources, my machine, the story, all the elements of our 5 fundamentals, which I know you'll reiterate those.
I will, but I think that's really interesting, Jeff, because I'm in a couple of these sort of CMO groups, like CMO huddles, and a couple of WhatsApp groups. That phrase that you just said, you'd think you'd hear more of. I'm a CMO of a turnaround, or I'm a CMO and we're doing this, or it tends to be I'm a B2B, B2C startup, not a lot else, right?
Yeah,
I'm in a particular industry, fair enough. But I think we should pay more attention to this element of how we define the businesses we're in. So I think that was an interesting statement you made there. So let's start.
I try to come up with interesting statements every episode.
Yeah, that's why you're here, man. So a quick reminder of our 5 effing marketing fundamentals. And of course, I will link to them in the show notes because we've got a little booklet.
A little pamphlet.
Yeah, a little booklet on the website, which you can flick through. And I shall include a link to that. So number 1 is the master plan. There are our goals, our OKRs, and our objectives. Number 2, the knowledge, our discovery and insight, the ICPs, personas, all that good stuff we've got to do. Number 4, the store. Number 3, rather. What am I talking about? I didn't number them in the notes.
Here, I'll do that.
Number 1, the master plan. Number 2, the knowledge. Number 3, the story, which is our value proposition and content strategy and what we're going to tell. And number 4 is the campaign, putting this all into action. Number 5 is the machine, which is all the marketing operations, people, process, and tools that we need to support all of that. So let's start with number 1, the master plan. This is about OKRs and goal setting, aligning with the business. I assume this is very appropriate for this process.
Extremely appropriate. Since the marketing master plan is dependent on the company's strategy, I'd say that this is where the stars has its most consequential impact. And depending on what type of company you are, it might be its initial impact. And you might say that the marketing plan needs to align with the stars. So you don't have to throw in another catchphrase here, but it's like, it just, what are your growth projections? How's the company going to grow? Is it new products, new markets, existing products is it, what's your position versus the competition in the market? So, this is where realignments may come in. Maybe somebody is dominated now. And so, okay, now we need to change what our plan is. And so these questions must be answered at the corporate level, and then each business objective should be aligned to your marketing objective, the key results you're going after, your goals, your strategy, how to get there, your resources, the tech, the people, all the parts of the master plan sort of like fall out of that initial input from this strategy, and which of the stars you guys are focused on.
Yeah, I like the fact you threw in competitors there, because I think the other thing is, imagine if you're the only one in a particular category that's struggling with, and you're having to do a realignment, or you're reinventing yourselves, you're on the back foot. And if all your other competitors are in growth or sustained growth mode, that's going to be a bigger challenge than if the rest of your competitors, if the whole category is struggling, isn't it? So and
I think we've been involved with some companies where they've been in categories that the category basically evaporated, and some new category, multi-channel marketing popped up where, marketing automation, fell aside or something like that. And so you're like, we're still in the old category. We got to realign.
Yeah. Well, last week I talked about a turnaround that I was in the web content management space, which is a very crowded space even back then when I was in it. And, but I think that the renewed energy of being in a turnaround with new investment, new leadership can actually give you a bit of a bounce. Gets you a bit of attention, gives you a bit of a bounce in the category, and you can live off that. Anyway, I've distracted us anyway. So to your point, so for the master plan, I completely agree, and this is probably almost what the model was designed for, isn't it? It's aligning all the C-suite.
Yep.
So this is probably a good strategy to actually get some agreement around the rest of your colleagues to say, what kind of company are we? And then we all recognize the key results and the OKRs that come off of that.
And hopefully they're really
so let's jog on. And I know that I'm slowing us down. So what's next? The knowledge. And this is, again, where the model is the most useful when we do our discovery, which is basically what the knowledge is, right?
Yeah, it's like, particularly... for like startups where it's like, who's our target customer? What business needs are we meeting? So there's research that has to happen, to get the financing, let alone to think about a marketing plan, right? So so you almost, even though when we think about which of our 5 fundamentals, the STARS model impacts the most, you may say it's the plan. But, there's a lot of research that needs to be done before you get to understanding what the plan should be. And so this is where, as I think you said, you create your ICP, you understand your competitive framework. I mean, there's all the things that go into understanding who you are, what problem you're out there to solve. And this has to happen, in my experience, this is the sort of thing that happens on a continuous process, whereas like the master plan is something that's like created for an annual cycle, obviously executed and evolved and stuff like that, but they kind of operate on different time frames, if you will.
Yeah, and I always struggle with this when we talk about the 5 effing fundamentals, regardless of stars, is does the knowledge come before the master plan? And the thing is, the element of the master plan that has to come first is the fact you need to understand what the company strategy is in order to then do the right research and discovery. But on the other hand, when you start doing your detailed master plan, you need to know you need to do so these things are really interconnected, aren't they? It isn't like
absolutely
one and then the other, which is always hard with a model. So our model has a slight flaw in it, folks.
It's the chicken and egg question. And you could say, who cares? Because you need both chickens and eggs.
Absolutely. So let's dig into this a little bit. So while we're doing our discovery and our knowledge phase, how do you think our ICP and market focus is changed by us being one of these different kind of organizations?
Well, I think if you're a startup, you need to be laser focused on one or two ideal customer profiles, and as you mature or whatever, you can get into multiples, but it's really it's like you have to be focused or you're not going to succeed. Because if you don't succeed, and if you put out too many and you don't succeed at any of them, or you stretch your resources, you don't have the option to really stretch that far. So, and then as you get you get larger organizations, then you can have multiple customer profiles, you can have multiple market focuses, and and then you may find, if you're in one of the I would say either the reboot type of categories, you may find that you need to sunset one of your product lines and customer groups and accelerate a new one. So I think these are very important to understanding, again, the connection between the research and the knowledge you need to gain and where you are as a market phase, in a company phase.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And this, I'm like I keep mentioning, I'm working with a startup, and we're talking about ideal customer profile. I am trying to keep it singular. And it's like, what about this one? How many do you need? Well, we've got about 5.
Then it's like prioritize and pick one, and then
absolutely. then we're talking about whether we've got segments within the ICP, and it's like, no, you've got to keep this very focused. So I agree with you on that. What are the other things do you think we need to consider when profiling our business aside from stars? So obviously we like this stars thing. We've been talking about it for ages, but what do you think?
Well, I think your ability to execute is really important. So, you could do that exercise, the theoretical exercise of who's our ideal customer profile. And then you got to ask the question, well, can we actually can we capture that customer? Can we service that customer? And startups and turnarounds and realignments of those three of the stars are typically not positioned to execute against their new business objectives. That's why they've got to go into this mode, because they either resources don't exist or they're misaligned, and you've got to go through the process of how do I rework my resources, because I only have so much I can invest. So where do I reduce investment? Where do I increase investment if I'm in either that turnaround or realignment phase? Whereas if you're in the accelerated growth or, sustained growth, then it's more about, you're still about the ability to execute, but you're typically in a good position and you're trying to scale up.
Yeah. What I'm hearing here, and it's the thing we talk about quite a lot on this podcast, is understanding your capabilities and doing a gap analysis. We're always saying a gap analysis, right? So that's what it would be, is that realization of we're this kind of business, but actually our operational part of our business is set up to be something else. So something's got to change, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I like that. So we're B2B and we're selling to businesses. And one of the things that struck me about this, could we apply the stars model not just to ourselves, but to our ICP and be aware of where they are? Do you think that's something that we should think about? Would that work in ICP?
It's a really good question. It's tough to answer, and it may be very situational focused. So I think in general, if you've got a expense management software package, and you're thinking about who you're selling that to, and there's going to be common buying needs from companies that are, in sort of a realignment or a turnaround phase, up to companies that are trying to scale up. So, it really wouldn't matter. But, if you're, let's say you're focused on, building the capabilities within a startup organization. So, you and I as marketing advisors or interim CMOs, it's it might be that, we need to look. So a startup is actually going to be part of our ICP, because if somebody's too big, it's there's things that there's complications I don't want to deal with. So I'm going to work with startups. So so it could, but it's not necessarily so.
No, I agree, and I think this is what inspired the this point actually, as I was thinking about it, because one of my clients that I'm working with, actually catching the client at the right point in their maturity and growth is very important for them. If they're too mature, then it's too much, and too early that they can't, they don't realize the problem and they can't fund it. So I think there's always a maturity model, isn't there, in the sweet spot of your ICP. And also I was thinking about us, what kind of organization would we be looking to help, or do we help? And that kind of inspired that. So
what's a couple of immature consultants? Sorry,
we're sustaining success, Jeff. What are you talking about?
Okay.
And so that's cool. So that's the knowledge. So there's quite a lot to dig into there. And I think we could probably talk about that even more. But let's move on to the story. So the story is where we're coming up with our value proposition, our content strategy, and all that good stuff. What do you think there?
Well, the story also relates to a large extent to your brand. And so, your brand is radically different from a startup to, all realignment up to sustaining growth. And I was kind of thinking of this equation is that, that the story is kind of the merger of your brand and the value proposition with the needs of your customer. And so the first part of that equation is really defined by stars, and some companies, buyers will want to work with mature organizations. Some want to, maybe in particular type of solution they're looking for. They're interested in working with startups to, so they can like have a partnership and kind of meld the product that is being serviced to them. So I think the story, again, is something where where you are as an organization is going to be part of the story, no matter how you slice it. And it might not be the major feature, but it's certainly going to be something that your buyer wants to know about.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and I had a couple of points on this one. The first one, which is that to sort of extend on what you were just saying there, and you mentioned like startups. I think as well, it is the story that you're telling. It may be that you actually have to tell the story about the problem you want to solve, right? Because it might be that there isn't an existing category. There's not something you can sort of hang your content marketing hat on that says, this is the thing we do, these are the people we go after, and this is what it is. You've actually got to create some education in the market about, look, there's a different way of solving this particular business problem. So I think so if you're already established and you're sustained growth, you're probably in an established category, right?
Yeah.
So the next one, the other part of this that I was thinking about, and I think we mentioned it a little bit last week, is I think the story is absolutely critical for turnaround and realignment, both internally and externally. And it's almost more critical internally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've been involved in that kind of thing, right?
Well, yeah. And then last week, I think I briefly mentioned kind of a turnaround experience that I had, which was, it was a product group within a larger organization, and and internally and externally, there were kind of like, it was kind of doubts about, this is a product that's been around for a couple decades. It's, it's not new and exciting. Other gorillas, like the Oracles and Microsofts have dominated the market. So, so what's your story? What's your message? And so a lot of our work was focused on kind of new messaging and branding actually branding the product itself to differentiate from the company, branding, the sort of the sub-products of it, putting it in the context of what was going on in the market, which was absolutely relevant. So it's like, we could, in the era of, burgeoning internet businesses and stuff like that, we could be very relevant. So don't view us as being, part of an old guard.
Yeah.
So there was, there was a lot to work on there, and it wasn't changing, at least at this point, it wasn't changing selling processes and anything like that. It was really just about, coming up with messaging and branding that made people internally feel good and the customers feel good about buying from us.
I like, well, yeah. And what you're saying there pulls at a thread that we were talking about just a moment ago, which is that you can be in a large business with a number of different business units or acquired companies that are all different on that STARS model. Yep. And then if you're in one of those departments, you may be fighting the momentum that the whole business is like stayed and steady and sustained growth or whatever it is. Whereas actually you're a startup and you need to make some kind of noise in the market in order to move. And your priorities and your story is going to be different. And you're probably going to need to do some education internally, externally about the problem you solve. Exactly the thing I was saying about being a startup, right? Yes.
The stars have to align. Just had to say that.
That's the watchword for this week. So last week it was reaching for the stars, and this week it's stars having to align. So that's the story. And then so let's move on to when the rubber hits the road. So this is the campaign. So this is when we're planning on, actually delivering on what the business has asked us to do, which is some MQLs and leads, right? So,
I was thinking when you said that where the rubber meets the road, we often talk about having little sounds that we could like tighten. So this is where the screeching wheels go. Okay, we got to take off. Well, if the stars are going to realign your master plan, and you've got new knowledge and you're building a new story, then you've got a new campaign. Or multiple campaigns depending on your products and customer segments.
Can I just pause a second there? Because when you say you got a new story, a new campaign, right, we're stopping what we did before, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because so often that I find There's like we've got this new idea, and that's additive to the existing.
Yeah.
No.
You know, one of the things that we used to do in workshops was, you know, it was a what to do and what not to do. It's like, let's explicitly, oh my gosh, I think you and I have been involved in where we never really did the what not to do part.
Yeah.
But it is, you want to be explicit. We will not do, you know, X, Y, Z because we're off doing A, B, C.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that you know I used to say to clients, it was kind of the mantra when I was in Serious Decisions, that, you know, is if you built a campaign on a solid foundation of understanding buying needs and you know your solution and the market conditions, then basically you've created the bones of a campaign that don't change. It could last for years, you know. But if one of those things change, then it's time to, you know, reboot, start fresh, you know, major overhaul. So, you know, it's like the, you know, startups, and when I think about the you know, the star phases and, you know, how they'll redefine, you know, one or three of those elements, you know, startups, turnarounds, realignments, you know, they'll need to spend on brand because, you know, you need to get a new message out there, or, you know, they haven't been introduced to you yet. You may also need to invest in enablement for your salespeople because maybe they don't know what to say. You don't want them to think up the story on their own. But accelerated and sustained growth models, it's more about investing on the demand side of the campaign equation.
Right.
You know, when you think about in the campaign, we often kind of balance. There's the spend on the brand and awareness. There's spend on raising, you know, increasing demand. There's enabling sales. Those are like three things that you could figure out what your portion of your campaign dollars and people effort is going into. And so I think STARS has a big impact on the campaign.
Yeah, I should have interrupted you there because I think your first point there, I've got to now keep track mentally of what you were just talking about. But I think that first thing, one of the things you said there is it could last years. And I think that's really, really important because I think that we underestimate how long it takes our messaging to, and I think this is regardless of STARS. We need to do stuff until we're bored of it. You know what I mean? Like, because the customer ain't not yet, you know what I mean? So often we want to run quarterly campaigns or reinvent the messaging, and the customer just can't keep up. It takes 18 months to really penetrate with a brand. I don't know what the data is, but it probably varies hugely between different audiences, different industries. So you have to know your own cadence, but it's not 3 months, right? So I thought that was a really good point.
Which isn't to say that things don't change within that 18-month, 2-year period or whatever, because, you know, you'll find out that things don't work. But, you know, as I said, it's the bones of the campaign, the buying needs, how you're messaging about your solution. You know, those are things, and then the market dynamics. Again, you know, you could be consistent on those two, and then some big company decides to enter the market, and you know, you're in a different situation.
Oh, absolutely, and that also spins back to the knowledge, and which is the keeping a pulse on where it is that you are. Have you changed in your STARS thing, and keeping an eye on the competition about whether that's changing in the category. But also, I mean, back to our point there about the campaign. Obviously, I think you've covered it from what I was going to mention here. Is that if you're a startup, you know, you've got a different set of, you know, I always talk about awareness, revenue, and trust, right? If you're a startup, you've got to be focused very much on awareness and trust, and the revenue will come, hopefully. Whereas if you're in a turnaround, or if you're trying to restart the patient, then revenue is probably the most important thing. And so you need to be looking at customer marketing, advocacy, reducing churn and retention if you're in a turnaround, so you don't lose, you know, the bread and butter and the revenue you've got. So I completely agree with your points there about the campaign. So that's the campaign done. So let's move on to number 5, the machine. So what are the operational resources? This is the operational resources that are available to the I was reading your notes there. Does that change really depending on the STARS model?
Absolutely, because in your master plan, you need to define the resources that you need to hit your goals, and particularly you need to define things that you don't have, so that you can either, you know, plan for the gap or address the gap. And as we said a little bit earlier, startups are notoriously short on resources. So then it's kind of like, okay, what, when you think about the machine, it's people, process, tech, and data. So what tech do we need to invest in early? What data resources are needed? Are we staffing up the skills short supply? Are our processes defined good enough for us to execute? Whereas when you get into accelerated growth, and it's all about scale, so you're buying and defining, new things to handle the activity, and the challenge is more on how do I prioritize? What's the tech piece, or what? We're going to fix some process. What do we need to prioritize to make sure we're going to be able to execute and hit our goals? And turnarounds and realignments, it's like you may have the operational pieces, but they're all in the wrong place. And when I did tech auditing consulting at Serious Decisions, it was interesting because as I was thinking about this, most of our clients were kind of in that boat. Tech, they had investments in technology they didn't need. They had things that they needed they were missing, but they're kind of at budget or over budget. They had good processes that weren't supporting what they had. So it's like there's a lot of stuff to fix to make sure everything gets aligned to help your hit your goals. And then if you're in, I just have to have this last line. If you're in the sustained growth mode, it is, as you say in the UK, keep calm and carry on.
I wasn't gonna stop you from your last line. It's just that I was just going to interject in that last point you were making about tech investment, because I think, and we've covered it on the show a couple of times, is there's a huge amount of value in doing an audit of your technology that you have.
Absolutely.
Obviously, if you're a startup and you're only using a couple of tools, one thing, but it quickly grows. It's like a snowball going down a hill, isn't it? Suddenly you've got all this shit. How do you deal with it all? But yeah, I love your keep calm and carry on. So thank you very much for mentioning that.
And but actually, there was one company that it just popped into my mind. It's like where, we had defined that they really needed something to help them with their content engine. So at the time, or content marketing platform or something like that. And it's like they had one. No, actually, no, sorry. I'll take that back. It was a digital asset management system. Yeah. And darn if they didn't have one, but they got rid of the team that knew how to use it, and they weren't running the processes right. And it's kind of like, well, you're paying for it.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. In fact, there are so many stories we could come up with around this stuff from both of our experience. But what I think is interesting about those first two that you were saying, startups and accelerated growth, the challenge is, from a resourcing perspective, you may have all the resources in terms of you may have budget and you may have momentum and all those good things, but you haven't got the time to put in the good processes in order to scale how you spend that budget. And you need the right people. You always think, an injection of budget is what you need. Well, the problem is, or you need more agencies or more help. You need more people in order to spend that money to manage those agencies and stuff. It all has to grow together, doesn't it? And it's you're as fast as your slowest.
And maybe everybody's complaining, when you do the audit and you're talking to various people, and it's like, this doesn't work and that doesn't work and they don't listen to me and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. The nice thing about being in a startup is there's only probably 3 or 4 of you in the room having that argument. But I think when you get into, turnarounds and realignments, that is so tough. Painful. Because we talked about that last week. You've got people in different cultural almost places, haven't you, in how they feel about the business and their relationship with the business, and you're trying to shift it forward. Anyway, so that's cool. Thanks, man. So we went through all of the aspects of our 5 effing marketing fundamentals and what to think about when you're looking at the stars, aligning with the stars, which is watchword of this week, rather than reaching for the stars. And so what song are you coming up with this week, Jeff? Because this is your week.
I went way back into the archive to pull I think it's my favorite David Bowie song, Starman from 1972. And as he says in the song, there's a starman waiting in the sky. He's told us not to blow it because he knows it's all worthwhile. So, that's kind of like why people should be talking to us, because we're like the starman. We'll help them not blow it. I love that. They're putting the fundamentals to play.
Always be closing, Jeff. Always be closing.
ABC.
Yeah. And it's an absolute classic, Bowie, because I wasn't going to argue with this one despite it being 1972. But I'm thinking about what my favourite Bowie track is. I'm more 80s Let's Dance and stuff, but old-fashioned.
That's a good era too, yeah.
But anyway, Starman is
Heroes,
perfect.
We could have put Heroes in,
Let's just start thinking of topics that just match David Bowie stuff.
Yes, there's a David Bowie song website that has 400 songs and people's comments on all 400 of them. So.
Well, we're obviously doing this the wrong way around because we come up with the topic then the song. So we should come up with the song first, then the topic. All right. I come up with the song first when it comes to the newsletter. So when I write it. So anyway, thank you very much, Jeff. I'll play out with Starman from David Bowie from 1972, and you're going to
we're going to record something next week, so we'll
good. Yeah. But I think we know what we're going to talk about as well, aren't we? Because we're going to talk about budgets as we zoom towards budgeting season again. So we're going to talk about budgets, and we're going to look at a couple of studies from Forrester about B2B marketing spend. So I'm looking forward to chatting to you next week on that. So
absolutely,
look after yourself, mate, and I'll see you then.
I will.
You too, buddy.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Didn't know what time it was, the lights were low. I leaned back on my radio. Some cat was laying down some rock and roll, that is all he said. Then the loud sound it seemed to fade, came back like a slow voice on a wave of fade. That weren't no DJ, that was hazy cosmic jive. There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. There's a starman waiting in the sky.
Thank you, Jeff. That was, of course, a little snippet of Starman by David Bowie from before you were born, and the links to the things we refer to will be in the show notes, and you can download for free our 5 effing marketing fundamentals from rockstarcmo.com. There is a link on the homepage. Right, it's that time of the week to retire to the Rockstar CMO virtual bar for a cocktail and a chat with my chum, the chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, Robert Rose.
Dr. Grant, my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
Demon Roberts, what are you drinking?
Oh, hello. Wow. Oh, my goodness gracious. What? You've turned the bar into Jurassic Park. It's amazing. The dinosaurs, the music, the John Williams music you've got going on here, all of the huge dinosaurs. I'm just so impressed. You've turned this whole thing into a Michael Crichton novel. It's pretty amazing. You should be proud of yourself.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. Yeah. I was very ready for that, obviously, as usual. But well, you need to diversify, and it is the summer, so it attracts a summer crowd. It's much nicer, and
I will tell you that the
coming in.
I will tell you that the drink that we have tonight is perfect for the Jurassic Park theme because we're going to do something tropical.
Good show.
We are going to do a classic pina colada for our drink tonight, and we're going to do a frozen pina colada. And so, of course, the pina colada, very famous for its fruity, sort of pineapple-y and lime taste. Big umbrella in it, of course. We have to have that, and the little coconut. And so it's basically 2 ounces of your favorite rum. And I like a really light rum in my pina colada because I don't love the taste of rum, but a light rum is great. And then you do a cream of coconut. There are plenty of brands out there that you can get cream of coconut. Coco Lopez is one, and there's some others. And then an ounce of pineapple juice, and then a half ounce of lime juice, freshly squeezed, of course. And then if you can get pineapple chunks to put into the blender, that's great because it gives it that sort of wonderful texture. And then basically you put all that into a blender, you blend it all up, and you get into an ice, of course, put ice in there as well to give it that frozen sort of smoothie texture. And you end up with a beautiful frozen pina colada.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah.
For a lovely warm day that we've got, and amongst all of these, I've got no idea how I'm
these amazingly large reptiles. Yeah, it's It's
I
pretty
have no
crazy.
idea I'm going to produce the show this week, so let's see how
Yeah.
that goes. Right. So
Got all
when
T-Rex sounds going on. You've got all of it.
so once these animals have cleared away and we've been eaten, or whatever's going to happen to us in this bloody bar, and the conversation, as inevitably it does with us, turns to marketing. What are we talking about this week, mate?
So I think this topic is going to stretch over into next week as well.
Okay.
Because there's two things that are happening in marketing right now. Trends. These are big trends, big topics that we can start to talk about this week, and then we'll probably have to continue our conversation next week as well. Which would be, so one of them, so there's a lot of talk right now, and this is and I've noticed that it's true, a lot of talk on how we need to be optimizing for marketing and content beyond our website. We spend so many years and talk about our owned media properties, our website, our blogs, our email newsletters, and all those kinds of things, and the value of those things. But and we can lament this because it's a kind of a sad state of affairs that we find ourselves in. But nonetheless, we're here, right? It's the oxygen that's in the room, so we need to actually breathe it. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, well, there's a lot here, but basically, let me give you three sort of examples. One is this idea of zero-click content, right? So we know that organic search to our owned media properties is going down. We also know that on social media, just putting a provocative headline with a link to our article is not working anymore. And so, and this, by the way, is true with email as well. Just literally sending your email newsletter that says, hey, our email newsletter is out. You should click here and go visit. That's not working anymore. And so what's happening is that we're now optimizing for value in reach. Amanda Natividad over at SparkTuro, she's got a whole article on this idea of zero-click content and marketing that way. But it ostensibly means putting all the value of the content in the actual platform itself. So it's basically writing the entire article for the LinkedIn post, or writing the entire article for the Facebook post, or writing the entire article in the email itself. So no click-through is necessary or required to get the value of what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
Also, it means creating specific strategies for all those walled gardens, right? So many times social media strategies were literally like spray and pray of our links to our stuff. And the same post would go on LinkedIn, the same post would go on X, the same post would go on Facebook, the same post would go here and there and everywhere. And that was basically, your promotion strategy. You're using social media as a promotion strategy to bring people in. And that doesn't work anymore. And you've got to now take advantage of the For You algorithms that are out there and basically some are calling this a social first strategy, some are calling it a social out strategy, which is leveraging social media to create a specific content strategy for each platform and use the engagement there to provide insight to your other marketing strategy. And then the third, which is kind of an evolving area, but one that's worth its own sort of book, is really the hiding content in a proprietary way. In other words, creating digital scarcity right now. So there are, everything from, okay, you're going to place your most valuable content behind a subscription wall, like you're only going to get it if you subscribe to this thing, to hiding now content from social search engines and AI and regular search engines, right? So I'll note that Reddit, by the way, is now blocking all search engines except for Google, which is now paying it money to actually do. And so there may be value in creating some digital scarcity with our knowledge and our content and we've got to create that sort of specific strategy for each of those things. So I think next week, let's talk about all of that. What we can do this week is say, okay, what does that mean for owned media? Like, what does that mean for our website? What does it mean for our email newsletters? What does that mean for, what we're doing on our owned media properties? And what it means is that we have to take really a much higher emotional and thought leadership and valuable approach to content than just answering questions, right? So in other words, the days of the FAQ are over. right? It's just over. Nobody cares. They can get that information through search and AI, right? So duplicating an FAQ on your website isn't going to provide any value. You've got to get to a place where the content that's on your website is built specifically for driving toward either some sort of goal, like a subscription goal, a buy now goal, a donate now goal, whatever those goals are. Your website has to become literally stickier and differentiated and a reason to go there. And so that has implications to the kind of content that we create. So how do you do that? Well, you've got to develop what I've been calling the best next, right? So in other words, you've got to create experiences across your owned media ecosystem that each one links and is connected to whatever the best next is. In other words, if I come to your blog, there better be an immediate place for me to go, whatever the best next experience should be. And if I'm at your website, same thing. If I'm in your email newsletter, same thing. There needs to be all those experiences have to be valuable and connected together and telling great stories that make us want to continue the journey. Because otherwise, we're going to optimize one side of this beyond for reach, and we're going to optimize this for conversion. And that's the new way to think about marketing.
So it sounds like then from the rented channels, shall we call them, what you're doing there is just pure brand awareness on the belief that you wouldn't click. You're saying we don't put links in there. We're just going to share our content on LinkedIn as an article. Let's say there's no link back to our article, but we're just building awareness of our brand so that people will hopefully search for us and then come to our website organically almost. Is that the suggestion?
And it's 100% accurate. And I mean, honestly, if I'm completely transparent, it sucks. I hate this because what it means is that it puts an increased importance on rented land. But it's about building for, there was an article I wrote, a couple of weeks ago, was talking about search, right?
Yeah.
Which is with zero-click search and we talked about it here on this show, with how few click-throughs are actually happening on search these days.
Fascinating, that was.
And so when you think about it and you sort of abstract that logic out, what it means is that in a perfect world, every piece of content, let's assume that you can create a valuable piece of content, a lesson, a case study, a customer story, an educational piece or an engagement, an inspiring piece, and it's this valuable little glob of content that you have.
Yeah.
In the perfect world, it would be available to search. It would be available on YouTube. It would be an audio piece of content. It would be available on Maps. It would be available on Yelp. It would be available. It would be available every single place. And obviously that's impossible to do. But you want to engage. Basically the strategy is to build for impressions. And the idea of building for impressions means you have to buy into the rented land algorithms, which means you're not linking through to your website. You're not linking through to your owned media. You're delivering value within the walled garden itself. And so the way to create a call to action to that is to say, in the context of the piece, somehow make a connection that there's more over here, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's, and this is too simplistic, but literally it's putting the entire white paper in a LinkedIn post and at the bottom going, if you'd like more like this, you should come to our website, and not link the website, but just literally spell it out, That's the state of where we find ourselves these days. And as much as, like I said, it's as it sucks, it's where we are with the way that consumers are getting locked into these walled gardens.
Well, and I'm working with a client on this very thing about our content strategy. And we're doing various experiments like that, where we're posting whole articles on LinkedIn with no links. We're posting some articles with links. We do a newsletter, which is like a roundup of the industry news with links and mentions. And we're just seeing how each one of those things performs, because it has a different level. And meanwhile, we're also posting stuff on the blog, because we're finding that actually Google is finding that content, and therefore you're building for organic. The challenge with all of this, which I'm sure you've recognized, is then of attribution, isn't it? Because whenever you're doing brand building type activities, and that's basically what you're doing for impressions, that's brand building and awareness, right? It's very hard then to link that to the fact that somebody came on your website, filled in a form, and took a demo.
Yes.
And yet our organizations, our leadership teams are now wired up, and our marketing automation tools are now wired up to assume the way the world used to work, right? And that we can do all of that.
In many ways, we're going back in time, right? In many ways, we're going back to the very early days of the web where, now what I would say is that, so the very early days of the web, when we would have our websites or our e-commerce channels, the websites were ostensibly digital billboards, right? They were, here's the facts about our business. Here's where we're located. Here's our hours. Here's our products. Here's the description of those products. If you'd like to talk to somebody about those products, here's a contact us page. That was the basis of our web presence, right? And if it was e-commerce, it was like there was one extra step, which was, and look at what you can buy, and you can buy it here, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't about delivery value. And of course, content marketing changed a lot of that and turned a lot of these marketing websites into publications, if you will, that were built to engage, design, inform, and provide helpful information and education. And now what it is you sort of, there is a new paradigm that is very much like the old one, which is your website is really built around almost, the metaphor I keep using, and it's not a good one, which is a black hole, right? I mean, it's literally built to suck you into the sphere of influence. It's built to drive a subscription to your proprietary content, drive a donation, drive a transaction, drive some sort of stickiness. So it's a place where you want to come back to, right?
Yes.
In other words, it's got to create some sort of stickiness that whether you're a subscriber to the content and the education and the engagement, or whether or not you're buying something and you're a customer and you're going to buy something on the e-commerce channel, there needs to be a reason for you to go back. There's got to be a reason for you to go back and quote unquote live there, not just visit there. And so that means sales enablement content. It means training. It means education. It means, there's so many implications to all of that. But primarily, when you flip it then on its head and go, well, what does that mean for external points to your question? It's, you have to build the entire experience there too. Like all the education and inspiration has to be built specifically for those platforms. TikTok video is a great example, right? You're going to put a TikTok video out. It's got to set the context every single time. Every video has to set the right context so that if it appears somebody's new For You feed, they know what they're supposed to do, right? And it's just it's getting, it's difficult. It's challenging.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating, and I wish that we'd because I think all of this stuff is going to link together. All of these 3 points that you're making, so doing it over 2 shows is going to be fantastic. But we could have done a real special on this because this is a deep topic. Because this is a fundamental change, isn't it? And I think that the way that the algorithms have really kind of that's why it's rented land, isn't it? They make one change to their algorithm and all of a sudden your marketing strategy has to change. It's absolutely fascinating, I think. And
indeed.
Yeah, and I guess because I'm going to link back to that article about 0 clicks. There's a lot of data in there as well that supports this premise that you have on this, and I think this is absolutely fascinating. But for now, Robert, if people are looking for a sticky website that has the next best links on every page, and we do a horrible job at this.
No, we do an absolute shit job at this. So please do as I say, not as I do. Our website is still in that. In that old paradigm, if you will. It's contentadvisory.net is our
but also
on the web.
Also a little shout out for your newsletter as well.
Oh, thanks. Yes, that's been fun. Yeah, it's been fun. I will say it's called The Lens. And you can get it on LinkedIn. You can subscribe in LinkedIn. If you just go to my LinkedIn profile, it's there. You can also get it on our Substack, which you can get from our website. You can subscribe there on the website.
Yeah, no, it's really good. It's really good. And when
which
people
is a great example, by the way, of exactly what we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Is that I have the email newsletter available via Substack, via email, or the entire thing goes out on LinkedIn too. So
it was funny the other day. You posted something. It was about the AI, that phrase that we were talking about off air that I really loved. And I've forgotten it again.
Sophisticated mediocrity.
Yeah. And so I'd read the email version of your newsletter, and then I saw it on LinkedIn, and I thought, this is very familiar. I was like, I've read it already. It's fantastic.
That's right.
So, and it's that thing where you need to tell them twice. You certainly have to tell me twice, and I still don't remember. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And when people spin the dial and need to, where are they going to find you, mate?
LinkedIn would be the place. Yeah, as I would be the place. And unless you want a lot of Dallas Cowboys stuff, and then come friend me on Facebook. Yeah.
And who doesn't want that? And for me, you will be in the bar next week, because you've already told me that this is part 1 of a part 2. So
part 2, I will be in the bar next week. Yes, and hopefully you'll have figured out what to do with all these dinosaurs. Yeah.
Well, we've got an asteroid booked for midweek, so that should clear them out.
There you go. I like it.
All right,
Scheduled
man, I'll see you then.
Cheers.
Cheers, buddy. Bye-bye. Thank you, Robert. I reckon I could have spent the whole show just talking about that topic. A really interesting conversation, which we will continue with next week. In the meantime, you can read more on this in his rose-coloured glasses column on the Content Marketing Institute blog, and you can find it if you search, but I'll also include a link to it in the show notes. So that's a wrap on episode 229 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. You can find links to me, Jeff and Robert, along with all the things we discussed in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, along with our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. And thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and jiving along with us. I'd love to hear from you, so please say hello or drop us a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, as we loom in on budget season, Jeff and I will tackle that topic, and Robert will be back in the bar. In the meantime, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join me here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.